This is Kevin Tumlinson, author of The Coelho Medallion and more, and you are listening to the Unfreaking Believable podcast.
Welcome to this episode of Unfreaking Believable. We invite you to pull up a chair, relax, and join in for the next 30 minutes or so. We will bring you guests who are going to share with you the moments that have made a difference in their lives, and it's all because of that one inciting incident. We believe that life is infinitely stranger than fiction, stranger than anything the mind can invent. You might even say it's unfreaking believable.
Welcome to the podcast. We're your hosts. As always, I'm Jen.
I'm Jenny.
And I'm Betsy. Ladies, it's good to be with you tonight. How's everybody doing today?
Just awesome.
Awesome.
Fantastic. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Jen, do you have our word of the day?
Oh, do I have a wonderful word of the day for you today. Our word for the day is colliginous.
Colliginous.
And colliginous means misty, dim, and dark. So you might say it was a colliginous and stormy night.
Oh, I love it. I'm going to use that.
Yeah, take the cliche and make it complicated. That's what I like.
I always like to make the cliches complicated. All right, Jenny, it's time for your fun facts today. What do you got?
All right. Today I have two fun facts that are the origins of phrases we still use today. And the first one is give a cold shoulder. And this phrase dates back to the early 1800s, and it's actually an old tradition of giving an unwelcome guest a cold piece of meat from the shoulder of either a pork, mutton, or beef chop, whereas a welcomed guest would receive a warm serving. So this was a polite way of saying you're not welcome here.
So you would either give them a warm welcome or a cold shoulder?
Nice. Well played.
Exactly. All right. And my second fun fact takes us to the high seas of the 18th century, where ships relied on the sails for momentum and direction. These sails used ropes to help steer the ship and manage its speed, and these ropes were known as sheets. If one of the sheets were loose, the ship would become slightly off balanced. However, with three loose sheets, the ship would lose all direction and become completely uncontrollable. Now, back then, one of the biggest pastimes on board was drinking. And if a sailor was spotted stumbling around drunk, they would say that he is 3 sheets to the wind.
Fantastic.
Nice. My husband and I are licensed sailors, so I always enjoy a good sheety joke.
Right on.
That was just for you, Betsy.
Thank you. Very funny.
All right, let's do this. Today's guest is one of my picks, and I am pleased to have on the show Kevin Tumlinson, who is an award-winning and best-selling author of hundreds of books. His primary work is in thrillers, including the widely popular Dan Coulter archaeological thriller series. He also has published works in science fiction, fantasy, and escapist fiction. Kevin is also known as the voice of indie publishing for his work in conferences, public speaking, consulting, and his Word Slinger podcast. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me here. Glad to be here.
Word Slinger podcast. I really like that. It makes words sound like a weapon.
Words were my weapon. Yeah. And I get asked about that podcast all the time. I kind of put it on permanent hiatus starting in 2020. And I kind of miss it. I do miss it, but I get people asking me about it all the time. Like, when's it coming back? When you doing another episode? And so I kind of half consider doing it, but I haven't mustered up the courage yet. It takes a lot of work to do that show.
So what you're saying is that you're inspired by our podcast, and now the Word Slinger is coming back.
That could happen.
Because now that you've had a taste, you have to come back.
Yeah. That could happen. It could rise. Mist. I got it all wrong. I can't pronounce that word. Colliginous. Colliginous.
Colliginous.
Yes.
All right.
It's not like you're not a busy guy. It's not like you don't have enough to do, right?
Yeah, I got a few things. I'm doing a couple of things. Yeah. Right now, the most recent thing in my life is that I was asked to be the the CEO of Book Sweeps, which that's a whole new turn in my life. After 7 years of working with Draft to Digital as their director of marketing, now I'm kind of leading this company into a kind of a new era. So, on top of still writing, I'm still writing and publishing.
Congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, Betsy, are you ready for some rapid fire?
Yes, let's do rapid fire. Kevin, this is a tradition we do. I'm going to ask you this or that rapid fire, so you got to answer real quick.
I'll do my best. Okay.
Okay, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Book or audiobook?
Book.
Aztec or Maya?
Aztec.
Fantastic. How about Mike Rowe or Josh Gates?
Josh Gates.
Absolutely. I knew you'd say that. True story.
Yeah.
Josh did a live chat on Twitter. I'm a huge Josh Gates fan. He did a live chat on Twitter, and I asked the question, "What are you reading?" And you liked my tweet.
Okay.
So I kind of had a fangirl moment because Kevin Tumlinson liked my tweet.
Yes. Okay. All right. I don't remember that, I'll confess, but that's kind of on my bucket list. I'd like to actually meet and hang out with Josh at some point. I've had a lot of people tell me we know people in common, and I don't think he's aware of my existence at all. But I've had a lot of people who know us in common tell me that they think the two of us would actually really get along together. So, especially since most of my books could.
I have a feeling Betsy's about to become your very best friend.
Don't put too much stock in it. I still
now.
don't know the guy. Like I said, he doesn't know I exist.
Well, I know people that he knows as well. So I have that mutual connection. So maybe we can put our connections together and leverage it for both of our benefits.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right.
He could basically be Dan Kotler in my books. He's a little bit more. I don't know. He's a little more hammy. But Dan Kotler isn't far behind. So Dan Kotler kind of represents a part of my personality. So there's a lot of hammy.
Well, I think it's totally ironic that your books and my books are very similar because my male protagonist is very much Josh Gates, and he's very hammy, and he is probably a lot like your character too. And I'm going to be reading your books to find out for sure because they look fantastic.
Excellent. I'm in.
So tell us a little bit about your Dan Coulter series.
So it is the whole series is archaeological thrillers. That is a category that I don't know necessarily existed as an official category when I started, but it's definitely one now. It's one that I write in with alongside guys like Ernest Dempsey and Nick Thacker. There's a bunch of us that write in that genre. My character Dan Kotler, he's an anthropologist. He's a multi-hyphenate, actually. He's also got kind of a background in quantum physics. A long story as to why that was the thing. But he, at one point in his career, he got recruited by the FBI to help track down a terrorist who was using basically a Viking artifact in a way that was going to jeopardize a lot of lives. And from that point forward, he's been sort of on a unofficial contractor basis with the FBI in a new unit called Historic Crimes. And the running joke there is that it should have been called Historical Crimes. That's the running gag I have in the
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. That's fantastic. They sound like great books. I'm in. I'm ready to read them all.
They're there and waiting for you.
I'm literally sitting here on Amazon adding them to my TBR like right now. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And Kevin, I feel like we need to have Betsy mention what her book series is because Jen and I both read her series. So yours sounds right up our alley.
Yeah. So the Veritas Codex series is all about Dr. Lauren Grayson. She's a biological anthropologist, and she hosts a TV show where they go on the hunt for the answers to the world's greatest mysteries.
Okay.
And her partner in crime is her secret boyfriend, Rowan Pierce, who is a former military medic. Later goes in one of the later parts of the series, he goes on and gets his degree in archaeology. So I think I'm writing archaeological thrillers, even though I didn't know you had them.
I think you're in the club. All right.
So count me in. I'm in. I'm in.
Kevin, I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear what we brought you on the show for. And that's to tell us your unfrickin' believable story. So Kevin, the microphone is yours.
Well, I hope nobody was expecting it to be like some supernatural event or anything. It's on the skin of it. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's mundane, but it all starts back when I was in my early 20s. I used to be a producer for documentary television. We were doing. I've worked with PBS and Discovery Science, Discovery Health, and History Channel. I've done a lot of things for some networks, and the show that we were producing at the time was called Honor Squadrons, which was what we were doing was interviewing the people who were restoring historic aircraft, so primarily aircraft from like World War II. And so what we were doing was we were going to tag along with this group that was flying out of Galveston, because in Galveston, Texas. I don't know if there's a Galveston elsewhere, but Galveston, Texas, there is the Lone Star Flight Museum. And there was a whole group of these people flying out of there to a town called Angleton, Texas, which was about, maybe 100 miles or so away. And we all flew in these vintage aircraft. That's how we got the crew there. We took footage the whole time we were flying. And at that time, at that era, there was a brand new format coming out, which was HD. And Sony created their own version of the HD platform, this proprietary version of it. And so we were renting these cameras that were, each camera cost us like around $500,000 each. And so very expensive. All right. So that's the setup. We're doing this air show, a bunch of historic aircraft. And I've been in several of these aircraft doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and I'm filming. And so I'm in the back of a TBM Avenger, which is the same aircraft that George H.W. Bush flew. He had one called Barbara. He flew in World War II. Same type of aircraft. The guy flying this plane was the head of the Lone Star Flight Museum. So I'm in the back of this thing. I've got a camera, and it's a very expensive camera. And I've got a radio, so I'm in touch with my crew, who some are on the ground, some are in the air. And suddenly, over that radio, I hear a word I won't repeat on air. And the last thing you want to hear when you're in the back of a vintage aircraft is the pilot say something that you can't say on air. So there was a little moment where I kind of paused to let things catch up. And he announces to me, "We're going down." And no other explanations, just buckle up, we're going down. And then I hear my producer, the executive producer, say, "Make sure the camera's okay." So that to me, that was, I think, maybe he should have been checking in on me and the pilot, but I did make sure that the $500,000 camera stayed in good shape. So what ended up happening was we went down, and an oil line had broken free, and it caused all kinds of havoc. But among the problems it caused was that the landing gear couldn't come down. Like, we were going down one way or another, but we couldn't put the landing gear down. And so he starts heading for a cow pasture. And so I managed to wrap my arms around the camera. I'm no longer filming, but I have my arms around the camera to protect it for some reason. And suddenly we slam into the ground and slide across the ground in this cow pasture. And I banged my chin up pretty good. I had a big gash across my chin. There's blood down my shirt. The whole thing happens so fast. Like my memory of the actual crash, like, goes from hugging the camera to we're at a dead stop. And we all climb out. He and I both climb out. There's just the two of us. And we're standing on the wing of this plane, and he's got a big gash across his forehead. And I've taken, like, I had a t-shirt with me, and I'm holding that against his head. And he has this sudden realization that we're standing on the wing. That's where all the fuel is. So he tells us we got to get out of the plane, get away from the plane. Now, I had left the camera in the plane, and we're standing on the ground as far from this plane as we can get. And we hear the sirens from the distance. The fire trucks are heading our way. And he's like, we don't know if there's fire. We don't know if there's anything happening, but the plane could go up. That's what he told me. And as soon as he said that, it's like suddenly this whole thing hit me like there's a $500,000 camera on that plane and I'm responsible for it. So I ran for the plane and he's screaming, yelling, cussing at me, telling me get my, rump back there. And I get to the plane, I get the camera, I get out, and just as I'm leaving, I catch flames start somewhere in the plane. I just kind of see them out of the corner of my eye, and I'm booking it across this cow pasture with this camera in my arms. And around that time is when the fire department finally showed up, put out the fire, took care of everything. No explosions, no death and carnage, but that was a life-changing moment for me because, now I can officially say I've been in a plane crash in a World War II aircraft in the middle of a field in Angleton, Texas. And that's my unfreaking believable story.
Wow. That is unfreaking believable.
That is an unfreaking believable story.
Have you managed to work that into a book yet?
Oh yeah, that's been you don't go through a plane crash and not write about that at some point.
True story.
I almost told you about the time I was shot at in Vietnam. That's a whole other thing. And I'm not saying I was in the Vietnam conflict. I'm just saying we were in Vietnam in an aircraft and we were being shot at because we had bonus story. We had with us. We were shooting a documentary about a special forces mission that happened in the 70s. And the guys that were with us were technically war criminals in that region of the world. And so we were flying into the area where all these events happened, is somewhere in Laos. And as we're flying, we started taking gunfire. So I've not only have I crashed in a plane, but I've been in an aircraft that was taking, it was a helicopter this time, but I was taking gunfire in Vietnam.
Note to self:
unbelievable.
Don't fly with Kevin.
Don't fly with Kevin.
I was going to use it as my takeaway.
So, yes.
Don't fly with Kevin.
Sorry, I beat you to it. I've talked about this before. I'm phobic about sharks, but I'm really terrified of being in a plane crash, and I fly a lot for my job. And to me, that is just like one of those nightmare stories. But you had a successful landing because you walked away from it. So kudos to the pilot.
Yeah. See, that's exactly that's why I sit in the back of an airplane when I fly, because you've never seen an airplane back into a mountain. So
exactly,
that's my seat, very back.
Well, they've done all kinds of research studies on the safest place to be in an airplane, and it's not the front.
No, I wouldn't think so. Yeah, no. That's the first thing to hit. Yeah,
exactly.
I think sitting over the wing, right? Like I think the safest place on an airplane is actually sitting at the wing.
You want to be within 3 rows of an exit, behind the wing, on the aisle seat.
Yeah. So what I plan to do if I'm ever in another plane, if I'm in a commercial airliner that's going down, I'm going to wait until we're almost on the ground, and then I'm going to open that door and just jump out. And that way, Bugs Bunny style,
Bugs Bunny style.
And then I'll just tuck and roll. I'll tuck and roll, and I'll be the only survivor.
You let me know how that works for you.
Kevin, I can't believe you went back to the plane for that camera.
Yeah, that was I got in trouble for that.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I got in trouble for doing that. But and after I explained that, you told me to protect that camera and that I was responsible for it. I was a college kid at that point. I didn't have any money. I wasn't going to be able to pay off a $500,000 camera. Okay. The fun part about that story, by the way, is after it was all said and done, we had flown in all these aircraft from Galveston to Angleton, and we only had enough seats to get us back and forth because we had each of the aircraft. Well, because we lost an aircraft, now we were short 2 seats. So now they managed to get the director of the flight museum on the plane. There was no way I think he went to the hospital. Yeah. So there was just me, and there was no seat for me. So I'm actually there. I'm standing outside of a B-25 bomber that my producer is on, and he tosses me his credit card and says, "Find a way back to Galveston." And so
this sounds like it became an algebra problem.
Yes. You have one Kevin.
There's one
traveling north.
Yeah.
So I actually ended up finding somebody. I bribed them. I said, "I'll buy you a tank of gas if you get me to Galveston." and we stopped and got his gas, and he was on empty, and we filled him up with premium gas. And I kept the receipt, but just like I was told. And we get to Galveston, and I get to the producer. I've survived my plane crash. I'm in good shape. I got a little butterfly bandage on my chin, and I hand him his card, and I hand him the receipt for the gas, and he gets mad at me because I let the guy get premium gas.
Oh my
yeah.
God.
I work for state government. They do that too.
And how was the camera, by the way? Did the camera make it?
Camera had one tiny little dent on it from banging into the floor, or maybe it was from banging into my chin. I can't say.
That was
sure,
my question: did it hit your chin?
Yeah. So we ended up having to file an insurance claim on the camera, and paying. Yeah, we had to pay whatever the deductible was for our policy, which wasn't really a ton of money. It wasn't $500,000, but we did have to fix the camera. It was a minor thing. It wasn't anything major, but it still cost us out of pocket. So, but I was lauded as a hero for saving the camera.
But you shouldn't have had to in a life-threatening situation with a plane going down.
I don't think. Well, talking to him after the fact, he's like, "Well, he's like, I didn't quite realize the extent of what was happening. He thought we were going to put our landing gear down and land on the runway, but because the gear couldn't go down." Like, we lost all this pressure across the board. It was more than just an oil line, I think. I don't really know the particulars, but we ended up, we had to go down on our belly, I think also it was a scenario where we had to land in that cow pasture because that was as far as we were getting. And maybe it was down to he couldn't put the landing gear down because it would flip the plane. I do have a vague memory of him explaining that. So
let me ask you a question, Kevin. So you've told us about two legitimate brushes with death here. Did either of those sort of create sort of an existential moment for you where you kind of maybe approached life a little differently after either one of those, or were you just young and crazy and devil may care?
Like I said, I was in my 20s. I'm in my 50s now. I just turned 51, so that was 30 years ago. Hadn't met my wife yet. I think in my head I was I don't know. I was the guy who thought I have to protect that camera. I have to get that camera back. So I don't think it was. I don't think I had like one of those like existential life altering moments I probably should have had. I don't think I even thought of it as being a brush with death at the time. I had already had moments where I nearly drowned when I was a kid. I got sucked out into the Gulf of Mexico, and then there was another incident where I was trying to swim across the part of a lake, and I got exhausted and I couldn't make it. Someone had to rescue me. So I'd already had my brushes with death, I think, and so now it was just. I was worried more about that stupid camera than I was about myself. I don't think it even occurred to me that I could die. I don't remember it ever coming into my head that, oh, we're going to die. It was in my head. We were going to crash the plane, but he said he was going to land it on its belly. And so I trusted the pilot. That's all I remember.
And how many drinks have been bought for you because of this story? That's the next question.
Oh, man. I get more drinks bought for me because of the second story, the Vietnam story, and mostly by veterans who, especially, because we interviewed a whole bunch of people in SOG, the Special Forces group. And so, a lot of those guys, they respect anybody that's willing to take those kind of risks on their behalf, especially. Like, we were doing a story that was meant to vindicate this group. And so I got more drinks bought for me for that than for the crash. I did get a really fun note from that guy, the director of the Lone Star Flight Museum, and there was a whole there's a aviation magazine that covers that world, and so I was featured in that, and I had my photograph, and I had some of the photos I'd taken of the plane were in there, and so that was a little bit of a brouhaha over the whole thing, but Yeah, surprisingly, and when I think back on it, I'm like, wow, then people should have made a bigger deal of that than they did. But it was different times, I guess.
So you've done a lot since that day. Tell us a little bit about some of your other work, some of the things, your new position, some of your other things that you do for writers.
Yeah, so the writing community, that is my community and has been for more than a decade. I started writing and publishing back in 2006. I had a traditional contract that I ended up buying my way out of, um, and giving back the advance I'd gotten. And I discovered self-publishing as an industry in like 2008, and have loved everything about it. I had started the Wordslinger podcast as a way to connect to people in this business and learn from them. Not just self-publishing, actually. I was talking to people from all industries. I wanted to learn as much as I could about, things I could apply to my career and things I could teach others. But somewhere along the way, it just became like a part of my mission to help authors, build and grow their publishing careers. I like to help what I call will-be authors. Those people that they've got the bug, they've got they're going to do it, and they just need somebody to show them the way. And so I started working with Draft to Digital about 7 years ago, so a lot of people know me from that. I was the face of that company for most of a decade, and then when I got this invite to become the CEO of Book Sweeps, it seemed like a kind of natural progression for my career. But everything I've done, all the podcast, I've done thousands of podcasts. I've been to I've spoken at hundreds of conferences. I've helped hundreds of thousands of authors at this point, like legitimately directly talked to many thousands of them and indirectly helped hundreds of thousands of them. And that's just been, I don't know, it's been a career. The new role, Book Sweeps is about helping authors build what we call their author platform. Get a email list growing, get a following on Amazon, get a following on BookBub. That's what the company does. Ryan Z founded that in 2016. He's genius. He's done remarkable things with it. He's also a co-founder of Plotter, which if you don't know about Plotter, I'm not a plotting writer, but because I'm a pantser all the way. But even I have bought and started using Plotter, and he and Cameron Sutter founded that company. But that's the thing, is like the reason I was so attracted to this role was Ryan and I have a similar sensibility about like what can we create next. And so there's a bit of a pivot that's happening with Book Sweeps. There's things that he and I are going to build that are sort of on top of that model and also extraneous to it. Like we're going to build a few things that really have nothing to do with Book Sweeps, but are kind of in the same universe, we'll say. And it's just part of my ongoing mission. Like all this stuff, it's just, I guess, I can't really point right back to the, crash landing in an airplane as an impetus for any of this. But I will say I've done the best I can with the second chances I've gotten since that and other incidents, and my goal has always been like, how do I believe in the Jim Rohn philosophy of you can have literally anything you want in life if you're willing to help enough other people get what they want. And that's been
fantastic.
My mission.
That's a terrific philosophy.
Yeah, I live by that philosophy.
That's fantastic. Well, Kevin, I want to thank you for everything that you do for the writing community and all your contributions to our journeys. I met you at WriterCon, plug. Gosh, a couple of years ago. You probably don't even remember it. It was just one of those in passing things. And I was just immediately impressed because we use Draft to Digital. And so, definitely appreciate everything that you've done. And why don't you tell people where they can find you and your exciting books and everything that you're doing right now?
You can find me at kevintumlinson.com is the best way to find everything Kevin. And I will say, if I'm allowed to plug something, I did in the past 24 hours, I've put a book up on pre-order called God Mode, which is a bit of I'm revisiting my sci-fi roots. And this book, what's special about this book is I wrote it entirely on Substack for my paid Substack subscribers. First time I've ever done that, written a book sort of in public out loud. And I think it turned out fantastic, but that's available for just $2.99 right now as a pre-order. So you can find that at kevintumlinson.com.
Kevin, I want to thank you for sharing your story today and what makes you so unfreaking believable. And I'd also like to thank my lovely co-hosts, my partners in crime, for joining me tonight.
We got you.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on whatever platform you choose to listen in on. Join our Unfreaking Believable Facebook group and follow us on TikTok and Instagram at UFB Podcast.
Don't forget to follow our website at ufbpodcast.com. And if you have an unfreaking believable story, reach out to us at ufbpodcast@gmail.com. We'd like to hear your story too.
Betsy, how about you send us out with a quote of the day?
All right, I'm actually going to quote our guest today. Resting on talent alone will lead you to a mediocre life.
Let's all just take that word of advice forward until our next episode. And guys, don't just be awesome.
Be unfreaking believable.
See you all next time.